You know, we all think we know the story of Adam and Eve in Genesis 3. But what if there's a huge piece of it we've all been missing? What if, hidden inside this story of sin and punishment, is actually the first piece of good news in the whole Bible? Well, that's what we're going to dig into.
So that really brings us to the big question, right? Is Genesis 3 just a story about a curse? I mean, it's so easy to get bogged down in all the details. The fruit, the snake, getting kicked out of the garden. But what if the real point isn't about what they lost, but about this incredible promise that shows up right in the middle of all that chaos? Okay, so before we jump to the good stuff, we gotta understand the judgment. And the text is super clear. This wasn't just about breaking some rule. No, this was a massive crack in the foundation of everything. It shattered the harmony of creation and left behind a world full of broken relationships. And this damage, wow, it was everywhere. Think about it. It wasn't just that connection with God that broke. That's where the fear and hiding came from. It was also internal, right? A broken relationship with yourself, which brought on all this shame. Then it was horizontal, breaking the trust between people. Hello, blame game. And it even messed up their relationship with nature itself. Just a total system failure.
Let's break down the specific consequences. For the serpent, this whole crawling on its belly thing, that was way more than just a physical change. It was a symbol of absolute, total defeat, humiliation. For the woman, something as beautiful as giving life now comes with pain, and that perfect partnership of marriage, now it's hit with conflict. And for the man, well, work used to be this creative thing, a partnership with God. Now, it's a grind, a struggle. And that whole return to dust thing, that becomes a cold, hard reality. But, and this is where it gets really good. Right in the middle of all this doom and gloom, there's this jaw-dropping plot twist. And it's hidden in the harshest curse of all, the one aimed at the serpent. This is where we find that first tiny glimmer of hope. And here it is, Genesis 3:15. You could make a case that this single verse is one of the most important verses in the entire Bible. God says that an offspring of the woman is going to come along and deliver a crushing, fatal blow to the serpent's head. And yeah, he'll get wounded in the process, a strike to the heel, but it's not a fatal blow.
You know, there's a fancy theological name for this verse. The Protoevangelium. It sounds complicated, but it just means first gospel or first good news. Now just think about that for a second. At the absolute lowest point, the moment of humanity's biggest screw-up, God is already announcing his rescue plan. That's pretty amazing.
So what does this all point to? Well, it's seen as a direct prophecy about Jesus. He is the offspring of the woman who delivers that head-crushing blow to Satan, a fatal blow. And that wound to the heel, that's the cross. It represents the suffering and death that Jesus would go through. Painful for sure, but not the end of the story, because it's overcome by the resurrection. But God doesn't just stop with a promise, with words. His very next move is this powerful, physical picture of what redemption looks like. And it's the complete opposite of what Adam and Eve tried to do to fix their new problem of shame. See, Adam and Eve, they grabbed some fig leaves. It was their solution, a flimsy DIY fix that wasn't going to last. But then God comes in and provides something totally different, coats of skin. And this just perfectly shows the difference between our own effort and God's grace, doesn't it? One is weak and self-made, the other is a real, lasting gift. It's the difference between trying to cover up our own mess and receiving a covering that only God can give, and one that, you'll see, comes at a cost. And that's the whole point right there. To get those coats of skin, something had to die. An animal's blood had to be shed. This is the very first sacrifice in the Bible, and it sets up this huge idea that runs through the whole story. Covering sin requires a substitute. It's this powerful picture pointing straight to the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus, the Lamb of God.
So how does Adam react to all this? I mean, he just got a death sentence. You'd expect him to be pretty down. But what he does is just an incredible act of faith. He doesn't look at his wife and call her mother of the dying. No, he names her Eve, which means life giver. Why? Because he heard God's promise and he believed it. He trusted that even with this curse of death, God's plan for life was going to win out through her descendants.
Okay, now we get to the part we always think of as the big final punishment, right? Getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But what if we've got that all wrong? What if this wasn't just punishment? What if it was actually mercy, an act of protection? Let's just think through the logic here for a minute. Humanity is now in this broken, sinful state. Now, what would have happened if they ate from the tree of life then? They would have been stuck like that forever. Can you imagine an eternity of pain and shame and separation from God? It would have been a nightmare. So by blocking the path, God was actually protecting them. He stopped an eternal tragedy from happening, and he kept the door open, so to speak, for his rescue plan to work. And that's really how this whole chapter wraps up. The story doesn't end with a door that's locked forever and the key thrown away. No, it ends with a path that's being guarded, and with this built-in promise that there's a way back. That little detail is so important. The path back to the tree of life, back to God's presence, it wasn't destroyed. It was guarded. There were cherubim, a flaming sword. It was being kept safe, just waiting for the right time to be reopened.
So when did that happen? When did the path reopen? Well, it was at the moment Jesus died on the cross. That's when the veil in the temple, that huge curtain that separated God from people, was torn from top to bottom. That guarded path was finally thrown wide open, free for anyone who wants to enter.
So we end up right back where we started with this ancient story. And it really gives us two options for how to deal with our own shame and our own failures. There are the fig leaves, the flimsy do-it-yourself cover-up, and then there are the coats of skin, the real lasting covering that comes from grace and from a sacrifice. And the question the story kind of leaves hanging in the air for all of us is, which clothes are you wearing?